Welcome to California in Focus. This is your host, Kenneth Schrupp, here with Madeline Shannon, our California government reporter. Madeline, you wrote about how there's a lawsuit to stop California's new congressional redistricting map from being adopted. This is a lawsuit from the National Department of Justice. Tell me more about this lawsuit.
So in this lawsuit, which is playing out in a U.S. federal court in Los Angeles, arguments are being made by the U.S. Department of Justice and lawyers for Assemblyman David Tingipa, who filed the lawsuit that the Prop 50 maps are illegal because essentially Prop 50 allowed for a racial gerrymander and for at least one or two districts in Central California to be redrawn based on race, which goes against the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And on the other side, lawyers for Governor Gavin Newsom and the Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, are saying that it's not a racial gerrymander, that the districts drawn by Prop 50 are not racially gerrymandered districts, but that they are politically partisan districts. And the gerrymander is not racial in nature, but political in nature. And that does not run afoul of the Voting Rights Act. So those are the two arguments being made in court this week, or the arguments that were being made in court this week before closing arguments wrapped yesterday.
Let's back up a little bit here. First, tell me more about what Prop 50 was and what the process for creating these districts was before Prop 50 was passed.
So Proposition 50 was California's mid-decade redistricting effort and was the only statewide ballot measure on the November 4th special election ballot that all registered voters in California got about a month and a half ago now. And Prop 50 did pass with a pretty big share of the vote. More than 60% of California voters voted in favor of Prop 50. And of course, there was a lawsuit pretty much ready to go as soon as Prop 50 passed on November 4th. And David Tingipa, a Republican assemblyman from Fresno in the middle of the state, filed the lawsuit with the help of the U.S. Department of Justice. And really, that was the crux of Prop 50. And it was in response to the state of Texas's own mid-decade redistricting effort that they went through this past summer. Assembly or state legislators in Texas picked up about 5 new seats because of the mid-decade redistricting effort that they pushed through in Texas. And Prop 50 here in California was California's answer to that, and allows Democrats the opportunity to pick up 5 new seats in the U.S. House of Representatives in next year's midterm elections to counter the Republican influence from Texas.
If I remember correctly, what doesn't the Citizens Redistricting Commission pass in the early 2000s?
Yes, that's right. California voters passed a measure that allowed the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to exist in 2008. And the commission draws both state district lines for state assembly and state senate districts. And in 2010, voters in California opted to expand the commission's power to draw congressional districts for U.S. House of Representative and U.S. Senate districts in the state as well. And it's the commission that has the power to draw district lines for both state and U.S. Districts. And so usually, ever since 2008 and 2010, when voters gave the commission to the power to draw those lines, it is the commission that has that power. No other branch of the government, no lawmaker in California has that power. But Prop 50 took that power away from the commission and opted to pass Prop 50, which redrew district lines halfway through the decade. And you're right that usually redrawing district lines happens only once a decade after the U.S. Census, and that's how California's voters wanted it after passing the measure that allowed the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to draw those lines. But Prop 50 reverses that decision and will allow the district lines drawn by the Prop 50 election to be in place for the 2026 midterm election, the 2028 presidential election, and then the 2030 midterm election as well, before reverting back to the commission.
Because every time a temporary power is adopted, we always see that power given back to the original body. That happens often, right?
Yeah.
Looking over your story in this case, it seems like a lot of this question of whether or not it was a racial gerrymander relate to statements made by a consultant named Paul Mitchell. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so Paul Mitchell was the main map drawer for the Prop 50 district maps that voters in California opted to pass. And Mr. Mitchell, in podcasts and other public forums, has said that he gave Hispanic voters more power by drawing the districts the way he did in certain parts of the state. But he didn't testify in this court case that played out in federal court in LA this week. He refused to testify or was kept from testifying. The jury's still out on that, so to speak. But he did not show up to testify any of the 3 days in court before the 3-judge panel opted to adjourn the court while they make a decision. There is some question as to whether Mr. Mitchell could have been subpoenaed. There is some information floating around out there that says that he lives more than 100 miles away from the courthouse, so he can't be subpoenaed. But then there's some argument that it doesn't matter how far away you live from where a case is being heard. If you're subpoenaed by a federal court, then you have to appear. So it's unclear if he would have been able to testify, but it's clear that he did not testify this week. So definitely kind of an interesting facet of the case, and one that I was unsure how it would play out this week, but he did not show up, and he's getting some criticism from Assemblymember Tim Gipa for not showing up in court to defend the maps he drew.
Given that the Texas redistricting was initially struck down by lower federal court, but eventually was upheld by the Supreme Court, do you expect to see a similar pattern of this case reaching the Supreme Court?
I don't think it will reach the Supreme Court, but only time will tell. It is clear that lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have a definite stance on this lawsuit one way or the other, and California's voters have a stance on this lawsuit one way or the other. But it remains to be seen what the judge's decision is going to be in this case. We are expecting them to announce a decision today or tomorrow. And if it goes to a higher court after that, we will see.
Thank you for your time on this, Madeline. I'm sure we'll keep up with this and more at thecentersquare.com.
Thank you, Kenneth.